Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever and wherever you're watching us. Welcome to another episode of Conical Supremacy. My name's John Noreko, and I'm pleased to introduce my co-host and good friend, Mr. Doug Cornquist. Doug, how are you today, man?
John, super dyna-whopping.
I love that. Hey, man, we got a great show today, don't we?
Yes, we do.
And we have Mr. David Gordon-Shute.
He's hyphenated.
Yes, well, and rightly so. He's a wonderful player, leader of the Onyx Brass. And before we get to that interview and music, I wanted to ask you, how was your week this week?
No complaints.
No, actually, you should be talking about the session you did the other night for a certain individual who just turned 90.
Well, I shouldn't be because they told us not to.
Oh, okay, then we won't talk about that. But I'm sure it was a wonderful experience.
It was great to see him, and it was great to play his music. The orchestra played wonderfully, and we played Happy Birthday to him in F. Okay.
In F.
Well, it was just.
Yeah. Sorry, usually it's just B flat and get it done. Anything else going on this week with you?
A lot of teaching, which is nice. It's good to see my students. They're all doing fantastic. We're having this heat wave here. It's going to be close to 90 this week, so we're outdoors.
So digging it, man. It is so nice.
Okay.
Got the house open. I'm just, I'm going to sit out in the backyard, drink a little beer, that type of thing. But, yeah, this week is actually kind of cool for me. Did a session a while ago, and for those of you who are Jeopardy fans, check out the college tournament. Hear a little bit of tuba on that.
I'll take tuba for 50.
Yeah, that's if they only knew, right? Anyway, why don't we get going? Let's check this out. Here's a great video. You want to set this video up?
Yeah, I do. This is one of the videos that Dave sent us from London, and he called it the teaser or the preview for their latest album, which they did in 2021. And there's an incredible story, which he will tell, about a mysterious packet of letters delivered from a deceased relative. And honestly, my jaw dropped when I heard this story, and he created an entire album out of this family connection, which is astonishing. And he re-recorded the Festmusik der Stadt Wien, which is, as far as brass pieces go, that's at the pinnacle. And
absolutely,
you would think of all the beautiful recordings out there, why does this need to be redone? But you must listen to this, and you'll know that it needed to be redone because these players are so wonderful. It's just one of the best, if not the best, recording of the piece I've ever heard.
I cannot agree with you more. Why don't we put that video up right now, and please enjoy David Gordon-Shute and the Onyx Brass.
This latest project by Onyx Brass with Chandos and John Wilson has been a very personal project for me because it stems from a collection of letters. In the mid-1930s, my great-uncle, great-auntie and grandmother, my great-auntie and grandmother were sisters. They came over from Berlin. Things were getting a bit nasty for them, and so they sought asylum in the UK, which is where they settled and made their lives. and they brought with them some letters. Now, no one knew about these letters, and really it remained that way for a long time. And then when my great uncle died about 30 years ago, 2 weeks later or so, my grandmother produced an innocuous looking brown envelope, and she said, "He wanted you to have these." So I looked in the envelope and emptied out the contents, and this host of letters fell out, and that was pretty unremarkable. But then I started looking at the names on the letters and saw people like Robert Schumann, Felix Mendelssohn, Johannes Brahms, and it became quite a giddy experience. And really the letter that started this project off was this one here. So I don't know if you can see in the bottom there, but it's signed by the legendary Richard Strauss, and is written to Siegfried Ochs. And this, of all the letters, was the most specific in terms of the piece it was referring to, and it just so happened to be referring to a piece that I had been looking at in the Royal Academy of Music Library when I'd been a postgraduate student there, thinking, oh, this would be great for a brass ensemble. So it's when I made that connection that the whole project suddenly came to life for me and really fired up my imagination.
And today we have on the show, as you just saw in the video, the wonderful Mr. David Gordon-Shute from the Onyx Brass. And what an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today, sir.
Thank you for having me. I've watched your podcasts with envy and amazement, so I'm very happy to be here.
Well, it's our absolute pleasure. David is coming from us from London, and we're just so pleased that he had the time this evening to have a little chat with us. Doug?
Well, I really want to thank you, and this often happens on our show. It is with great admiration and vulnerability that I, first of all, express a very large amount of gratitude to you. Unbeknownst to you, David, you've been an inspiration for me for at least 10 years. My first introduction to your playing was an Onyx Brass CD. I don't know why I got it or how, but I listened to your recording of the Doggerel Machine, and I was so fascinated. There's a short little tuba cadenza in there, and the playing was just so beautiful from top to bottom, the tone, pitch. And I said, who is this guy? And then I sort of poked around on the internet, and I saw that you're very, very busy. Could you tell us a little bit about your career? I mean, what is a day, a week, a year like for you in your musical world in London?
Sure. Yeah, well, I mean, I'm now 49, so, you know, as with a lot of people, it all started out just with some freelancing after I left the Royal Academy of Music, which is also in London. Had a very happy 2 years there, and was freelancing for a bit, and then started doing some teaching. And I guess I got my sort of job with the Birmingham Royal Ballet Orchestra about 15 years ago. So that's when the freelancing gradually sort of came to a close, but that's fine. You know, if we get jobs, we're lucky people and we hold on to them, and, you know, freelancers should be sweeping up the freelancing. So that was all great, and I'm still there with them. That's a part-time role, so that's 35 weeks of the year, the contract. And the orchestra is the only part-time part of the company, and it's the only London-based part of the company. So both those things are, you know, work out well for me. And then sort of combined with that, I went from being the tuba teacher at Eton College, which you might know is a big, you know, smart private school. I went from being the tuba teacher to the head of brass there, and that was about 13 years ago. So, and that's also a part-time role. So basically those two roles keep me quite busy. And then obviously Onyx Brass do concerts every now and again. And I do sort of other bits and pieces when they come along.
Sure. Well, now Onyx Brass is celebrating its 30th year, happily. How did that group come to be?
We started, I mean, we're going to be 30 next year, 2023. So we started, I mean, it's a bit cheesy. I don't know if we explain it on the website, but Onyx is an anagram of XNYO, and the original 5 members were members of the National Youth Orchestra of Great Britain. So X members of the NYO. So it's a bit cheesy, but, you know, and the ethos of the NYO, I mean, I know that you have a National Youth Orchestra of the US, and I'm sure all the states have youth orchestras, and I mean, they're very transformative experiences, these things for young people. And, you know, we were likewise taken off to another world, and you know, the bug bit us all, and we thought, how can we possibly make a living from doing this? So 5 of us, the reason that the group started, we were all aware that there were other, you know, really fantastic groups out there, some at the beginnings of their careers, others at the end. And what we were aware of was that you can get all sorts of different players within groups, but what we wanted to achieve was to have 5 players who make a similar type of sound. Because you can get quite disparate sounds in chamber groups, and it can still work extremely well. But we just wanted to choose 5 players who all made a very kind of specific, I suppose, you know, traditional British kind of sound. So that was the starting point.
With that said, David, if you don't mind me interrupting, sound concept is always something that we all teach. And can you expound on that concept of sound and kind of be a little bit more specific about the 5 of you deciding that it was this German sound, this English sound, this, you know, that type of thing? Can you expound on that just a little bit? And because the group sounds wonderful together and everybody's listening really, really well. And you're right. When I listened to your group, you guys kind of agreed upon this thing, and what was that agreed upon thing, if you don't mind?
That's a good question, and it's difficult to elaborate. But what I can say is that, having played together as students in the National Youth Orchestra, and you know, these are large sections of trumpets and trombones and tubas. We're talking, I mean, I think there was a section of 3 or 4 tubas when I was doing it, and, you know, 10 trombones, and, you know, the quiet passages are just single sections, but then the big stuff, everyone joins. So you hear, and you have hours and hours of sectionals, and individual people have to play B flat major in thirds to everyone. You know, there's all sorts of things you hear other people play, and there was very much a feeling of, oh, well, you know, Chris makes a beautiful sound, you know, wouldn't that be great? It was really Amos, the trombonist, and I who had a summer of interrailing. And we just sort of talked about it on these trains all the time after our last MYO course, and said, "What, this will be great. We can do this. The two of us make a sound that blends quite nicely with each other. Who do we think would be good on the trumpet? Oh, well, Chris makes a lovely sound. Oh, Duncan makes a lovely sound." So it was sort of hand picking our favorite sounds from former students who we played with, and then putting everyone together, and it worked nicely.
Well, it works lovely, actually. Doug and I were talking just before we started the show and going, are you playing E flat? Are you playing F? Well, I mean, I got to know, man.
So I'm probably regarded as a bit of a dinosaur in this respect. I mean, if you go to music college in the UK now, you get a very wholesome education of Fs and Cs and B flats and E flats. But I suppose because of the tradition in this country and the brass band tradition in this country, the E flats, the Besson or the Boozy, the old Imperial that turned into a Sovereign, and you've got the Yamahas, that's kind of the beginner instrument for most people. And I've got a double C that I play sometimes for the Prokofiev when we have that, and the ballet and things like that. But my E flat is sort of like coming back home, nice warm cuddle with the E flat. And I just feel so much more comfortable on it than anything else. And so I play it for everything.
I feel your pain on that one, because, if I could play C tuba for the rest of my life, I'd be a happy guy. I'm done. Yeah. I mean, Doug, luckily for Doug, he's a monster on everything. So,
Wow. The first note I ever played on tuba was on a Con E flat with 3 valves. It had been sat on the bell so many times it was flat. I mean, it was like the rings of Saturn across the top. And it had the most beautiful sound. That's still my sound concept. I mean, you, Dave, you get the most beautiful sound.
You do.
On your recordings, and your aesthetic of finding players with similar sounds and then combining them is so beautifully successful. I have to ask, on your recordings, well, this is even a larger question. I know from running my own chamber groups, it's always a democracy until the final decision has to be made, and then it becomes something of a monarchy. I don't know if you can answer this question, but is Onyx Brass more of a collaborative collective, or does one person have to do all the heavy lifting?
It's a sort of a combination of those things. So I don't know why it always falls to us tuba players, but I kind of am the administrative center of Onyx. And if promoters or festivals or our agent needs to speak to someone in the group, then it's me. And, like you guys, I'm sure you've got lots of WhatsApp groups and things on your phone. And if it's something I need to consult with the others about, then I'll do that. But if not, I'll just, give the answer. I mean, when it comes to the big artistic decisions, then yes, it's very much a democracy. And everyone needs to be on board. Otherwise, if someone's heart isn't in the project, then, you sort of feel like you're dragging someone along this road they don't want to be dragged along. And it's no fun for anyone.
No, it's not.
Can I ask a question specifically about your most recent album, the one featuring the Festmusik? I was fascinated with that video, talking about the letters and this connection to your family. Is that how the project happened, just organically from this packet of letters delivered to you from the past?
Yeah, basically, these amazing letters turned up, and I got them translated. And actually, it was only summer of 2019. So this is a long time after my great uncle had died. It was summer of 2019, where I had lots of time on my hands. And I just sort of thought, right, I'm really going to go through these letters and try and just get to the bottom of them a bit more. And it was then that I realized that the Richard Strauss postcard almost directly refers to this particular piece that I had nearly arranged around the time my great uncle died, which felt like a big coincidence, and one that I sort of felt I needed to pursue. And then this idea of arranging stuff around the dates. If the letter didn't refer to a specific piece, then I looked at the dates, and back in the old days, every single letter was dated 13th of October 1853. So, and all you have to do then is go to Wikipedia or go to Google Books and see exactly what the composer was writing at that exact moment. And I think in Robert Schumann's case, the variations on a theme of Clara Wieck that we arranged, I think his brother had died something like 2 months before he wrote that piece. So all sorts of things suddenly start, and you think, gosh, this is amazing. We must do this. And then, of course, I thought, well, if we're going to have 2 massive Strauss motets for 16 players that we're going to arrange and make happen, and no one else has done that yet for brass, then why not use all these wonderful players to do the fest music, which I know has been recorded many times by many wonderful groups, but it's sort of nice to do your own version of it.
Well, it's a wonderful recording. I mean, and the video shoot, it looks wonderful. You guys had a great time, but you also used that same space to record. What was the name of this?
The Noir.
Oh, the Noir, right? So why don't we put that up right now and check out the Onyx Brass?
2018 is the 25th anniversary of the founding of Onyx. We started in '93, and our main sort of remit that we've had all the way throughout is to commission new music. We're absolutely passionate about it. I think we've premiered or commissioned well over 150 new pieces now. So this is another 12 to add to that list. This has been in the gestation quite a long time. I have always been a massive jazz fan, and I was lucky enough to study in Banff in Canada in 1994, and Kenny Wheeler was one of the tutors, and I really fell in love with his music. I was lucky enough probably 6 or 7 years ago to play on Gwilym Sincock's Instrumation CD. Got chatting to him and asked whether he might fancy writing something for the quintet, and he very generously agreed. And I also got chatting to the drummer on that project, who's a lovely chap called Martin France, who played drums for Kenny's band. And I was talking to him about my long-held ambition to get Kenny to write a piece for us. And he said, "Oh, just ring him, I'm his drummer. Just tell him I said so." So I summoned up the courage and rang Kenny at home, and he was absolutely lovely and said, "Send me your CD." And so I sent him a CD, and he rang up and said, "Okay, you guys are very good, I'll write you a piece." And bless him, he said, "It may take some time," but literally 3 weeks later, I came out of the shower in the morning and I had a missed call on my phone from Kenny Wheeler, which was already quite an epic moment for me. And he finished the piece already. So I popped round to his house one Saturday evening and had a glass of wine with him, and he gave me the original manuscript. He hadn't even taken a copy of it or anything. And once Gwilym and Kenny were on board with it, it became quite a lot easier for me to make the cheeky phone calls to other amazing jazz musicians to say, "How about writing something for us?" And they were all, to a fault, absolutely lovely and up for it and really keen. I think one of the greatest joys for me is having 12 pieces now that are all totally different in style. There's not an overlap amongst them, really. Kenny's piece is with characteristic quirky Kenny humour, is labelled 1 for 5, but it's actually 2 movements, so that's very standard Kenny humour. And it's, as quite often with Kenny, it's a reworking of tunes he'd written. The first is Pretty Little Waltz, and the second is Everybody's Song But My Own. And that's very Kenny-like. It's got lots of slash chords and quirky little cross rhythms. Gwilym's is a beast of a piece to play. It's called The Stomp. It was originally called the Catford Stomp, I think, but then he moved away from Catford, so it just got rechristened The Stomp, and that's a very sort of whirlwind, very fast number. Lawrence Cottle's piece is very gospel-y. Mark Nightingale's is a very beautiful ballad dedicated to his daughter, Rosie. Trish Clues, which is a lovely sort of angular and quirky, a little bit Stravinsky-like in places piece, which is dedicated to the memory of the Charlie Hebdo attack. It's called The Mighty Pencil. They're just all very sort of complementary. A few slow ones, a few quick ones, a few hard ones, a few soulful ones. It's great.
I wanted to ask you, David, England was hit by COVID pretty heavily, and you guys were in lockdown a lot longer than we were. And you sent us a couple of videos that are, one is hilarious, by the way. And I want to play that, but can you kind of set this one up for us, please, if you don't mind?
Sure. I mean, so the horn player in the group, Andy, who's also a great friend, he's in charge of all our sort of social media, and he's always looking for ways that we can increase our friends and our likes and our this and our that and all this sort of thing, which I don't really understand because I don't do any of that. But so, you know, lockdown hits and we all had nothing to do. You know, I mean, I was very lucky and I was still paid by Birmingham Ballet, and I was still paid by the school I teach at. So, you know, I didn't suffer greatly. I mean, I'm sure with you guys as well, all sorts of musicians suffered terribly, you know, financially.
It was actually pretty awful for a lot of people.
Yeah,
but it was great in other ways. I mean, I spent a year and a half just practicing, which was great.
Amazing.
And then thinking up this show with Doug.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what a brilliant thing to have come from COVID, you know. And I think other people have had similar experiences where they've just sort of thought, okay, I've now got an opportunity to sit and think, and what would I actually like to do? Mm-hmm. And so the funny video that you're referring to was really a result of Andy, our horn player, saying to us all, come on, we've got to get something out there. We've got to increase our views. And if I'm completely honest, I am a frustrated musical actor. I have always wanted to be, you know, Tony from West Side Story, but I've never been able to sing that high. So that was always a ridiculous pipe dream. But I've always wanted to, you know, sing loudly and with lots of vibrato and look into people's eyes with a sort of passion and a hatred as I'm singing. That sort of brilliant melodrama that you get with musicals. So I came up with this sort of silly video, which I was really pleased with, but obviously I'm now completely embarrassed by.
I have to ask: is there any special connection between you and Victor Hugo?
No, but I'm glad you asked, Doug, because, you know, maybe we're distantly related.
Maybe there's a postcard yet to be found.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah. Well, hey, let's since we've talked about it, let's go ahead and put this video up for us right now. Check out David and a little Les Mis.
Hi everyone, Dave here. Well, it's lockdown time still, and it's a strange time for all of us, but it gives us time to just think about what might have been.
Valjean, at last we see each other plain. Monsieur le Maire, you'll wear a different chain. Before you say another word, Javert, before you chain me up like a slave again, listen to me, there is something I must do. This woman leaves behind a suffering child. There is none but me who can intercede. In mercy's name, 3 days are all I need. Then I'll return, I pledge my word, then I'll return. You must think me mad, I've hunted you across the years. Men like you can never change, a man such as you. Believe on me, can what you will. There is a duty that I'm sworn to do. You know nothing of my life. All I did was steal some bread. To the law, you have no rights. Come with me to 4601. Now before I see this justice, Jean Valjean is nothing now. I am warning you, Javert. I'm a stronger man by far. There is power in me, yet my race is not yet wrong. I am warning you, Javert. There is nothing I won't dare. If I have to kill you like here, I'll do what must be done.
So, David, that was absolutely wonderful. What a hoot. I was laughing.
I'm going to have to recheck those Oscar nominations.
Yeah, I
that
know,
were
really.
published
That's what
yesterday. Maybe it's on the list for best costume, I think. I think they did away with best musical, but this one ought to bring it back.
No,
Steven Spielberg.
Maybe
watched
this would be. Maybe you need to dream up a new sort of module for your students where. They need to do something like this. With everyone sort of doing all their multi-tracking in COVID, are they getting similarly creative? Are you finding your students?
Are the students getting creative?
Yours were.
Mine were.
I mean, and they still are actually.
They astonish me with what they're able to do.
I mean, I think for us, we've talked about this before. We're the ones who had to come up and figure this stuff out in order to continue teaching and things to that effect. And they were already on board, so it was kind of right. I mean, we had to make sure our computers were working right, get some mics, get the whole home studio thing going on.
Oh, sure.
Virtual sessions, all this other kind of thing. And thank God for Tech Sergeant Quinn over here. Helping us out all the time. I mean, we wouldn't have a show without him, and to make this whole thing happen. And it's the 20-somethings that have got this thing pegged, and they're using it to their advantage, I think. I mean,
but they're also showing us. I was a complete technophobe, Luddite.
I like
sure.
Luddite, yeah.
And I was just hoping I was going to be able to pass through onto the rocking chair without ever having to learn what goes on with computers. But no, as soon as the lockdown happened, I mean, I started getting calls for doing recording at home. And I said yes. And then, of course, I didn't say whose home it was going to be done. But I did have to, I learned Pro Tools. I bought microphones. I learned how to do this myself. And it was a very steep climb for me. But it made me realize that for my students, part of being a 21st century musician is knowing how to record your sound and how to share it with other musicians and how to collaborate electronically. And, our friends in the commercial world, our rhythm section friends, have been doing this for 20 years.
Yep.
So I'm just late to the party. I insisted that my students learn Pro Tools or Logic or Digital Performer or whatever they like. And, of course, they all picked it up in 3 days. They buy the program. Next thing you know, they're just, creating all kinds of things on it.
Did you go through a similar experience yourself, David?
Yeah, I did. And I mean, I'm not quite as far down the road as you guys. I mean, I just used at my school, they issued us all with iPads. So I've just been using the Apple stuff. Mm-hmm. I can't remember its name now. What's it called? GarageBand. Mm-hmm. Or Garage Band, as you say it.
I think it sounds better with garage, to be honest.
Thank you. Let's try and get all your students to call it Garage Band.
Thank you.
But that's as far as I got, really. And then, one thing I did in which was really fun, actually. But again, with loads of time on my hands, my father is in his 80s. And there's a lovely program on the radio here called Desert Island Discs. I don't know if you have a similar thing there, where a famous person is invited on to talk about the 8 recordings that they would take with them if they were stranded on a desert island. And these recordings have to be related to certain stages of your life. And it's, it's a nice way of chatting to someone about their life, essentially, and you get to hear their music choices too. And I just thought this would be nice to do this with my dad, because, I couldn't see him, and he was in the countryside, but we could use Zoom together and I could record them. And so we did a sort of mega desert island discs, and it turns out his tastes in music are very similar to mine. There was quite a bit of Sibelius and Wagner on his desert island discs. And unlike the radio program where they can only play 30 seconds, I did a version where we had the entire, fourth movement of Sibelius 2 and, all this one. So he had a sort of an hour and a half MP3 recording of our desert island disc. So I had to use a little bit of sound editing software for that as well. But that was fun, that was painless and enjoyable. And but I haven't got to Logic and Pro Tools and things like that yet.
Oh, you will. Don't worry. Hey, speaking of discs, the next video that you sent us of the Onyx Brass was during lockdown. It was a virtual session that you guys all put together. And I was wondering why, first of all, who did the arrangement and why you picked C-Jam Blues to just kind of mess around with, and whose arrangement is that?
Well, we've got, ever since we started nearly 30 years ago, a great friend of ours, French horn player called Tim Jackson, who is the principal horn player at the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra. And I actually got to know him through the European Union Youth Orchestra, which is, something you can do when you're a music college student. And in fact, the current 5 members of Onyx are former members of the European Union Youth Orchestra, rather than the National Youth Orchestra. But that's a whole other thing. And of course, the UK is no longer eligible to be part of the EU Youth Orchestra. But that's a whole nother story for a whole nother podcast. So we won't go there. But Tim did this arrangement. And basically the brief was we needed to be able to turn up to primary schools, so schools for children up to between the age of about 5 and 11. And we needed something that could get them playing whatever level they were. They needed to have been taught how to put the trombone together and put the mouthpiece in the right hole and play. But as long as they had about 4 or 5 lessons, we could just turn up and do this stuff. And he, very methodically did some beginner part, intermediate part, advanced part for, and actually what we found is that if we just do it with beginners, it's far more meaningful and got far more impact. And crucially, we can just teach them the notes without the music in front of them and without music stands. And then you're not having to worry about all this extra clobber that you bring with you when you go and do a school's concert or something. So we just turn up, they all turn up with their instruments. I start playing the bass line, and 2 or 3 of the other guys in the group have the sort of the melody, and the students can just go da 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 da. So they've only got to play 2 notes and learn 2 rhythms, and so they what kids are like, they pick it up so quickly, And
I think you couldn't have picked a better tune to do that with them, because I think when you get kids playing right away in that setting, it turns them on immediately to where I got to learn some more, and I got to learn some more, and I got to learn some more, and that's really what I think music education should be about, is that excitement, and good for you guys. So let's take a listen to it right now, if you don't mind, okay, man? So here's a little C-Jam Blues by the Onyx Brass.
Dave, as long as we've got you here, I had one question about the choices of music that Onyx Brass chooses to record. Who ultimately puts those together, the concepts for, well, first of all, how many recordings do you have out at the moment?
I think sort of actual Onyx Brass recordings, I think 7 or 8 maybe.
Wonderful.
I should know, shouldn't I?
Well, that's commendable.
And then we've sort of collaborated on 1 or 2 other albums that aren't Onyx Brass albums, you know.
And how many pieces have you commissioned for the brass quintet or brass chamber music?
That's now quite a lot. I mean, what we say is that we've given world premiere. I mean, we have commissioned a lot of music, but we also play for 1 or 2 organizations that commission the music that we play. So we can't claim to say, oh yeah, we've commissioned all these pieces, but we've commissioned maybe 70% of the world premieres that we've given, and then the other 30% have been commissioned for us or for a specific festival or something, and we happen to be the people who've given the world premiere.
Fantastic.
But it's something like 200 world premieres that we've given. I mean, we need to sit down and get the number properly sorted. And for our birthday next year, we've got, I don't think I'm allowed to tell you, but we're absolutely over the moon to have 2 the sort of amazing superstars of British composing are going to write 2 pieces for us. So that's really nice.
That's an incredibly significant contribution, rivaling, in this country, the New York Brass Quintet
Absolutely.
Or American Brass Quintet. And I already said this once, but your playing continues to astonish me with the evenness of tone, resonance, your intonation, and your phrasing, which, of course, now that we know you're a frustrated star of the musical theater, we understand. But do you have... could you list any of your influences? Were there people that really caught your attention when you were an up-and-coming young tuba player?
Well, I mean, funny enough, I'm talking to one of my students a little bit about John Fletcher at the moment, because this student is now playing with the National Youth Orchestra. So I'm over the moon for him that he's going to have this wonderful experience that I had, 30 years ago or whatever. And we're working on developing his range and his high playing, because he's going to be playing Rite of Spring with them in the Easter, which, as you know, goes quite high in places, and he's nowhere near those notes yet. So we're working on extension exercises and things, and I've given him a copy of the Bach cello suites to work on, and I sort of play them sometimes in my practice, but I didn't want to play them to this student, and so I just got John Fletcher up on YouTube playing, because he was the first one really to play all this amazing music, and everyone was like, oh my goodness, there's a tuba player playing some cello music and it sounds amazing, rather than it sounds awful and I wish you'd just shut up, and it was things like that, and also having never met Fletch, which is a huge regret of mine. We just missed each other. I remember turning up to a tuba lesson at school, age 16, and I had just got into the National Youth Orchestra, and there were 3 tubas in the room. I didn't have my own at this point, and there were 3 tubas in the room, and he had died 3 months previously, and my teacher knew his widow, and she asked him to sell his tubas, and I had the choice of these 3 wonderful tubas in the room, and my teacher said, which one do you want? And I chose one, and then I had to ring my dad, and I had to ring my grandfather, and they both halved the cost of it, and it was amazing, but yet I've never met him. So I think he is and will remain a huge influence on the UK music scene. And in fact, who was I talking to? Oh, I mean, look, this is your thing, John Williams, right? So I don't want to get too much into this. I mean, I have done a gig with him when I was at the Academy, which I will never forget. But I know that you've got the T-shirt, and you know far more about this than I do. But what someone was telling me the other day was, the first Star Wars movies went to the London Symphony Orchestra, and obviously that was great for them, less good for you guys out there. And apparently the reason why John Williams thought this was a good idea is because of Fletch and because of Maurice Murphy. So these 2 key brass players in the section. I mean, maybe you know more about this story than I do.
Well, actually, we had Stephen on quite a while ago.
Stephen Wicks.
Yeah, Stephen Wick. And he was talking about it because he played second to Fletch on those.
Right.
And, he got into that whole thing about that. And I was actually supposed to go to study with Fletch, and he died. So that's why I didn't come to England. And so it's just, I really think John Fletcher actually changed things worldwide for us as tuba players.
It was that sound on the Philip Jones recordings.
Absolutely.
That just stopped you stopped me in my tracks. I remember on the analog recordings and then the first digital recordings that came out in the 1980s, and it was just whatever that is, I want it. And then I still listen to his. Yeah.
Sorry, Doug, I beg your pardon.
No, please.
But there was something not only about his sound, but there was something about the kind of the engine in a quintet, the way that he would move things forward witithout rushing. That amazing gift that some people have. It just keeps chugging along. The momentum is there, but he's not rushing. How does he do that? And I often talk about that when I'm coaching other chamber groups. And he was a huge influence on that kind of thing. And I'm often thinking of it when I'm playing in Onyx.
Well, I think it harkens back, David, to what we were talking about earlier about how tuba players in brass quintets kind of we lead from the bottom up. And that's why I think a lot of us end up being the leaders of these groups, is because we're the ones kind of moving things forward. And it's all because of Mr. Fletcher that we got this thing in our heads now about going, well, it has to lead from the bottom up. That's how you push it along. I mean, we've actually had this conversation about it when you're sitting in the section as well, in the orchestra, where, if you really want to get things going, it's time to just kind of goose the trombone section and let's go, right?
Within reason.
Depending upon who's in the section. Well, I hate to say this, David, but we've run out of time, and I can't thank you enough for taking a little bit of time out and getting a hold of us and just having a wonderful conversation, man. What a wonderful playing, great group, and everybody out there, make sure you check out the Onyx Brass. They're well worth your time. Doug, anything else, my friend?
I just want to thank you so much. It's I never dreamed I'd get to hang out with you face to face over Zoom, thanks to technology and just the general goodwill that is sometimes found between tuba players.
Amen.
So thank you, Dave. And I just praise for your musicianship and your humanity and your good taste. Every time I think I have a good idea, I search the internet and say, oh, shoot, Onyx Brass has already done it. Thank you for
it's been lovely to chat to you both. Thank you so much for having me on, and it's a really great thing. No one else is doing a podcast like this, are they? So I mean, keep doing it, and I'll keep watching, and hats off to you both.
Well, cheers to you, my friend, and thank you so much for your time today. We're going to be back next week with another show. I got a feeling it's going to be a good one, and thanks so much for watching us today, and thanks again to Mr. David Gordon-Shute. We appreciate you very much, sir. Everybody have a wonderful weekend. We'll talk to you later. Peace out. Bye-bye.